you for joining us here, not just an MP, but also Labour's online new media spokesperson. We've just got out of the panel. It was a great debate tonight. And one of the big issues that came out was that a lot of the talk around new technology and social networking is how it can be used in the election. But what's really interesting is how it's going to change Parliament after the election.
Yeah, I think there are a number of ways in which it could be useful. I mean, I don't think you can underestimate the value of constituents feeling that they know their MPs. And I think that's important. And if you email constituents or you write letters to them, okay, they feel there's a bit of a relationship starting there, and obviously we need them face to face, that's ideal. But I do think that people on Twitter feel that they've got that instant connection, they've got that empathy flowing both ways. And so I think that's important in terms of encouraging greater political engagement. And because it's so easy to tweet, if someone, all you've really got to do is suddenly be on a bus stuck in the Bristol traffic, and you can tweet your MP and say, first bus are absolutely dreadful, aren't they? Which people do. And you've got across a political message to your MP. So I think that's important. I think campaign groups will be using it a lot more in future. You're already starting to see that with some of the organised campaigns. I mean, I always give the Scouts as an example, where they did the Stop the Rain Tax campaign, which was a great little hashtag on Twitter. All sorts of MPs were lobbied and signed up to it, and actually it resulted in the minister changing the legislation on it. So I think you'll see more of those lobby groups using it. Not the way that at the moment, as an MP, you will get postcard campaigns from people, but it's actually quite difficult for a lobby group to, you've got to send out postcards to all your supporters, you've got to rely on them to stick a stamp on it and send it back, or you've got to have a street stall. So I think they'll find Twitter very useful. And I think just the fact that, I try to use Twitter and my blog and whatever medium are available to me to explain to people and educate people about how Parliament works. So, for example, you always get a bit of a head of steam around opposition days or around early day motions. So I'm trying to say, well, actually, opposition day debates are just plain politics, really. Nothing happens as a result. Early day motions are what's been described as political graffiti. So, yes, it's a nice way of nailing your colours to the mast, but nothing happens. And I think it's important that people understand that. So if people know more about how Parliament works and how they can influence Parliament, and they can also then be directed towards Parliament websites or whatever. I think, again, that's going to make people feel that there is some point to them being engaged politically.
Now, that's a very interesting point, because all the parties have an e-government agenda, and Conservatives a couple of weeks ago announced that they were going to make all front-bench expenses available online. They were going to release data and make that accessible. And there are moves from all the parties to cover that.
Yeah.
But critics say, yes, but is making the data accessible really going to change anything? Can the public, by seeing that data, make better judgments, or is it simply too complicated for most people to engage with?
I mean, I post my expenses on my website. I have no idea how many people have actually bothered to look at them. I suspect that it's a very, very small number. So, it's there if people want to find it. And I think it's more important to be involved in a conversation rather than to just put tons and tons of information at people's disposal, because people want to dip in and out of it. People don't want to have to research a subject as though they're writing their thesis on it. They just want to be able to ask an MP a question and get a quick answer.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned expenses, because since the expenses scandal, people think that trust in politicians is an all-time low. And yet we're seeing that the politicians that are really active in using Twitter seem to have a very loyal following. Do you think the tools help you rebuild that trust and have a better relationship with people on an emotional level more than just on a policy level?
Well, I think certainly one of the elements of using Twitter that I've enjoyed is the fact that there are Labour activists out there or Labour supporters that you feel there's a sense of solidarity with them, there's a collective coming together. And whereas on my blog I quite often feel like I'm talking to you. You sometimes have to question whether you're right in what you say, because you tend to just get this tirade of abuse from libertarians who totally disagree with you, and you do sort of think, well, hang on, is it my logic that's wrong? And you have to convince yourself, no, I'm right. It's just they're slightly off the wall. Whereas on Twitter, you can say something and other people will join in, and sort of if somebody has a go at you, you can almost like walk away from the phrase sometimes, and there'll be other people that will take over the debate. And I think that's really useful in terms of like I said, a sense of solidarity, is that the collective voice of Twitter is important. And I think also the fact that it's quite a liberal voice, and you don't necessarily see that in the mainstream media. So the Jam War example was a classic one where it was, pretty much par for the course for the Daily Mail to run articles like that. But the fact that there were people out there that were appalled by it, that voice isn't necessarily heard in the, you might get somebody writing a letter to the Guardian or whatever, but it doesn't work in the same way that, a collective cry of outrage on Twitter does, which actually made the national news. So I think that's important.
One final question. I know you're not keen on the title, but people know you as Labour's Twitter czar. That's right. But the question is, why don't the Conservatives or Liberal Democrats have a Twitter czar?
Well, in theory, I was the last one to join the gang, because the Liberal Democrats have got Lynn Featherstone as chair of their technology board, which sounds quite Soviet and Stalinist, and the Conservatives had Jeremy Hunt as their new media campaign spokesperson. But we sort of decided that we needed somebody to front up what the party was doing, because actually Labour's doing some really good stuff across the field of social media. I think the reason why I've attracted the attention is because I do use it a lot more. Lynn Featherstone's got a good blog, and she's on Twitter sometimes. Jeremy Hunt is a bit sort of in transmit mode rather than actually a dialogue, and that is why the focus is on the Labour Party, because there's just so many more Labour people that are actually using it the way that it should be used.
Kerry McCarthy, thank you very much.